welcome to Not My People's Podcast. My name is Daniel, and what we are doing here, this is episode 3, where I read parts of my book, The House That Stands. We are on 1.13. We have sort of 3 small little chapters to go before the end of the part 1. So if you have been enjoying this and you want to see more of this, please let me know, because it's good fun to make, but I want to make sure that this is the best use of our time. So 1.13, what is truth? The truth sets us free. But what is truth? It is more than abstract factual correctness. It is the fruit of which tree we are grafted into, the very language we learn from our Father upon our new birth. The Jewish leaders were not speaking a factual lie when they said that their ancestor was Abraham, nor that they themselves were not slaves in the social hierarchy. However, they were not speaking the metaphysical truth that Jesus was discussing. Jesus says that the one who claims Abraham as their father and yet walks and talks nothing like Abraham is a liar. Abraham walked and spoke by faith, and the Jewish leaders walked and spoke by sight. Jesus likens this deep self-deception of claiming to be something other than what we are to claiming to speak the language of our so-called fathers and yet not speak their language. To say, for example, that we are Chinese, yet when a born and bred Han from China walks into the room and greets us in Mandarin, we don't know the language and get angry at them for not greeting us in English. We are exposed as fraudulent in our claims. In the same way, if we do not know the voice of the Spirit of God and are offended when he speaks because we do not understand, then there is a good chance that we are not born of God. But knowing this, the truth can set us free. 1.14. Freedom from sin for freedom's sake. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Galatians 5:1. It would be very easy, reading a verse like this, to think that what Paul means is that since we have been physically set free, we should not bind ourselves to a physical or political yoke of slavery. We need to remember that Jesus says that the one who sins is a slave to sin, or to their flesh. Other verses say a slave to our passions, that is, to the unconscious, visceral reactions of our bodies to any exterior stimuli. When compared with other imagery in the New Testament, we find that what Jesus means is that the one who sins is a slave to their own body. Paul, on the other hand, flips the situation on its head. The New International Version gives us a vivid image of disciplining the body. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. 1 Corinthians 9:27. In Paul's analogy, he is disciplining his body for a race or a fight. He trains others to run and fight, but would be a sorry excuse for a coach if he himself could not run or fight. What Paul and Jesus are saying is that either we are slaves to our bodies, or our bodies are slaves to us. We are either controlled by the flesh and the things of this world, or we submit to the Spirit and make our flesh the servant and slave of our minds. The idealists, of which I am one, are wont to remind us to take back our thinking from our bodies and give it back to our minds. This, I think, is the idea behind freedom. If freedom is a state of being, a state of mind that results in a physical reality, then the Spirit unchains our minds from our bodies, and we can then understand the sayings of Jesus in regard to food being for the body and not body for the food. We will slightly adjust to say that the body is for the soul and not the soul for the body. Both are integral to the interface. The body is the primary interface, the slave, but the soul is the one who communicates through the body. The body may be in chains and the soul free, but if the soul is in chains, then so will the body be. When the soul is set free, the body will not be far behind. No one who is master of their body enslaves another in body or mind to do their will. They are perfectly capable of doing the work themselves, and indeed say to themselves regularly, if you want something done right, do it yourself. However, when like minds meet, they spark genius between them and move mountains by the power of two or more souls who are masters of their own bodies, and therefore of their environment. These are the truly free ones. They are not necessarily marked by wealth or status or asceticism or poverty. They are those who tell their bodies to behave a certain way and obey. 1.15. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. However, there's a catch. The interface is broken. No matter how masterful we are over our environment, it is still marred by secondary interfaces that, over time, have weakened us. We attempt to tell ourselves what to do and end up crying out in frustration with Paul, "Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death?" Romans 7:24. Every action done in the flesh leads to death, and every action done in the spirit leads to life. Paul concludes that Christ saves us from this body infested with death. Belief in Christ as the light of the world sets us free, as Jesus testified about himself. Not free as in separated from our bodies of death, but free from the control of the body, and indeed freedom to enslave the body to the soul to be used once again for intersoul communication. I have a note here down on the end that there are two things that are consistent within every life. It's that we all have a hammer and we all have chains, okay? And we are either forging chains with our hammer or we're breaking them. So just keep that in mind. This is the last chapter that we're going to read today, so it's a little bit shorter, but that's okay. It has the idea of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. So let's get into it. 1.16, the state of affairs. Our bodies exude self-absorbed death when they are in control. And as a result, we drive people away from us, whether they be controlled by the flesh or by the spirit. People come together in the flesh when there is a common goal to legitimize, provide for, and protect one another's bodily well-being and interests. This is so ingrained in us that we all just thought, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is that what, or rather whom, we are protecting one another from are other primary interfaces controlled by secondary interfaces. Other people. We fail in our common goal of intersoul communication and settle for the compromise of interbody cooperation. People controlled by the spirit, however, are not concerned about their own legitimacy, safety, or provision because it does not rest in other people, nor even in themselves, but in the spirit. They speak the words they are told to speak. They go where they are told to go and do what they are told to do without fear of alienation from their source of value. Those controlled by the flesh look on them as if they were the hyper-individual, but that is their own failed eyesight. If they were to look on them in the spirit, they would see that they are one with the spirit and with all those who are also one with God. But again, do not derive their value from one another, nor their association from one another, but with God alone. There is a deep love between them because of their deep love for God. There's a deep unity among them because of their indescribable unity with God. And the ones who live by the flesh but claim to be redeemed are driven from their presence, because the spiritual ones don't need those who walk by the flesh as much as those who walk by the flesh think they need to be needed by other people. This is the clash between the flesh and the spirit. This is the battle for freedom that rages in the heart of every man, woman, and child. The flesh cries out to more flesh for safety, legitimacy, and provision, and the spirit rests full of value in the person of Jesus, the King. Now, the next part is part 2, the kingdom and house of God, where we're going to really get into the meat of what this book is all about. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today. You've been listening to Not My People's podcast. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.